Welcome. In this video I'm going to cover configuring network settings using nmcli and also editing network settings via the configuration files. Network Manager is a daemon that monitors and manages network settings. nmcli is a command line interface that talks to Network Manager and saves configuration files in the /etc/sysconfig/network-scripts directory. A connection is a collection of configuration settings used by a device. You can view connections by issuing nmcli connection show, which will output all connections. Use --active to limit the output to active connections only. To get a detailed list of connection settings, use nmcli connection show and the connection name. If you include the -p option, then the output will be slightly easier to read. Connection properties listed in lowercase are the configuration settings. Entries listed in uppercase are the active connection entries. Man nm-settings will give you a complete list of possible settings and their meaning. Use nmcli dev status to see the current status of each of the devices, and nmcli dev show, optionally with the device name, to see the current settings for the device. To create a new connection, you need to use the nmcli connection add command. To see how to use it, let's look at the help. Adding a connection requires the entries to be populated on the command line in the right order. Common options first, then type-specific options, followed by IP options. Common options requires type, such as Ethernet or Wi-Fi, and IF name, such as ETH0. Connection name is optional, but would typically be supplied, and add other options as necessary. Type-specific options requires you to check what mandatory options are needed for the type. For example, you must provide an SSID for Wi-Fi, and an APM for GSM. Whereas Ethernet has no mandatory options. IP options are optional, but can be specified multiple times if adding multiple addresses to the interface. All other settings, such as DNS, are done by modifying the connection. We will look at that shortly. Let's look at a couple of examples. This first one creates a connection called default for Ethernet device ETH0. It will auto-connect and get IP details via DHCP. Our second example adds a connection called static that is also bound to the Ethernet device ETH0. But this connection will not auto-connect and it has a fixed IP address and gateway. I can bring up either connection by issuing the command nmcli connection up and the connection name. Or, if I rebooted, the default connection would come up automatically. And at a later stage I could switch to the static connection using the same command. It is worth noting that in our example, if the static connection was to come down for any reason, then the default connection would come up automatically again. If you specifically want to disable the interface, and as such auto connection, then use nmcli device disconnect and the device name. I mentioned that other connection settings require you to modify the connection once it is added, so let's take a look at how to modify a connection. Use nmcli connection modify and the connection name, and then key value pairs. To see the current settings for the connection, we can use nmcli connection show and the connection name, and then modify any settings we need to from there. Remember, the settings are documented in man nm-settings. For example, to enable or disable auto connect, to set the IPv4 DNS server address, add a secondary DNS server. Notice the plus prefix to add it as an additional entry. This applies for array-based key value pairs. You can also use the minus as a prefix if you want to remove an entry. You could replace the IPv4 address and gateway, or add a secondary IP address, in this case without a gateway. One important thing to remember is that modifications are saved to the configuration, but not activated until the connection is activated, or reactivated. It is also possible to configure the network by editing interface configuration files, found in the /etc/sysconfig/network-scripts directory. The configuration files are named ifcfg-device name, or a variation of that, and contain a series of defined variables and their values. If the connection is using DHCP, then the boot proto variable will be set to DHCP, otherwise it will be set to none. Some common settings for both static and dynamic connections include device, which is equivalent to the IF name when using nmcli, name, which is equivalent to the connection name, on boot, which makes this connection start during the boot process. User CTL enables non-privileged users to manage the connection. If you are creating a static connection, then you will need to define IP address and prefix, and optionally include the gateway. Each of these can have a digit attached, starting at 0, indicating multiple IP addresses for the device, and as you would expect, entries using the same number are related. DNS entries can be added, along with a number indicating the lookup order when multiple DNS servers are defined. These start at 1. Finally, def route indicates if this connection will use the default route in the routing table. If you edit any ifcfg files to add, delete or modify entries, then you need to get Network Manager to read the configuration changes using nmcli connection reload. Then take the connection down and bring it back up again. Here is a quick example of adding another IP address to an existing connection and then enabling the change. Using Vim, I add the two entries, IP address 1 and prefix 1. Then reload the configuration files. Finally, take down and bring back up again the connection. To recap, Network Manager manages and monitors network settings. A device is the interface, and a connection is a set of settings applied to a device. nmcli is a command line interface to Network Manager that can be used to show and modify network settings, as well as start, stop, switch and reload connections. Adding a new connection may require a second operation to modify the connection as well, to update additional settings. New or modified connection settings require the connection be activated or reactivated to take effect. You can directly edit connection settings under /etc/sysconfig/network-scripts/ifcfg-device name. These files contain variable value pairs in a plain text file. Use nmcli connection reload and then nmcli connection down, nmcli connection up to have Network Manager use the new settings. That concludes this video. Thanks for watching.